Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something less comfortable. The world of Tudor child brides. Yes, the real story, not the fairy tale wedding, but the one where your coming of age means being handed off by your parents before you've even outgrown your favorite stick horse. Forget ball gowns and moonlit dances. Tonight's journey is about betrothals negotiated before your second set of baby teeth even comes in, and honeymoons that sound suspiciously like chores with extra steps. So before we all get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and let me know what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, click on that fan for the gentle hum of fake medieval ambience, and wrap yourself in a blanket. Or, if you really want the immersive Tudor experience, try piling on 3 wool tunics and asking your neighbor's sheep to breathe on you. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it's like to wake up one morning in the 1500s with your future already decided, your wedding arranged, and your main responsibility being, please survive until adulthood? Did child brides really spend their days embroidering? Or was it more like a Tudor version of group therapy with extra fleas? What did you do for fun, besides praying not to die in childbirth? How did anyone survive puberty with no chocolate, no privacy, and no running water? And let's not forget the all-important question. How do you politely decline a marriage proposal when you're still missing your 2 front teeth? Congratulations, you've just woken up in Tudor England. It's the year 1543. You're 12 years old, you own 1 dress, and the family goat is probably better fed than you. Good luck. Before you could walk, talk, or even decide if you were a cat person or a dog person, your entire future had been mapped out on a family tree, usually with a very bold line pointing straight to marriage contract. From your first swaddle, your less baby and more potential alliance. Let's set the scene. You arrive in a world where your very first cry is less "what a beautiful blessing" and more "does she look sturdy enough for childbearing?" The midwife gives you a once-over, like she's inspecting a horse at market. Your father is already calculating dowry expenses, while your mother is silently praying you survive your first winter, because half the infants don't. Family celebration is followed quickly by negotiations. Is your nose too long? Good for sniffing out a good match. Are you crying? Excellent lungs. She'll need them to argue about property lines one day. In Tudor England, your gender determines the opening chapter of your life story. As a daughter, your value is complex algebra involving politics, inheritance, and your mother's ability to keep you alive until puberty. There's no girl power or Instagram to document your milestones. Just a house full of relatives eager to remind you that every step you take is a step towards someone else's dining room table. If you're born into nobility, congratulations. The pressure starts immediately. If you're a peasant, well, the pressure still starts, just with less paperwork and more manure. While you're still wobbling around in your linen wraps, people are speculating about your future spouse as if he's just running late to the christening. Your first toy isn't a rattle, but a silver spoon engraved with the crest of whichever minor noble your parents hope will bite. Every visitor to the house has advice. She's got her father's chin, maybe she'll marry up. She's got her mother's hair, at least she'll be visible in candlelight. Gossip and matchmaking swirl around your cradle like a low-level weather event. Meanwhile, your parents are already planning your launch to market. By market, of course, I mean the marriage market, which makes the modern dating scene look positively laid back. Forget swiping right. Your fate is settled by a handshake, 2 chickens, and the hope that someone else's son doesn't have a mysterious cough. Your birth is not about your future happiness, It's about your family's place in the food chain, and you, tiny as you are already on the menu. Every milestone in your young life is another box ticked on the road to matrimony. Did you survive teething? Wonderful. She's hearty. Is she clever? Maybe she'll marry a merchant's son. Is she pretty? Well, as long as she's not actively frightening the livestock, there's hope. Your early years are less about childhood and more about careful preservation, like a rare cheese or an egg with especially good potential. If you get sick, the entire household descends into panic, not because they'll miss you, but because they'll miss the dowry negotiations. No pressure. There are no baby albums, just lists. Possible suitors, property deeds, vague promises written in ink that smears if anyone actually cries over your fate. Your worth is weighed not in hugs, but in land, cattle, and alliances. And if you think you're too young for all this, remember, your parents have probably been planning your wedding since before you were born. Modern helicopter parents have nothing on Tudor strategists. If there was a medieval LinkedIn, your profile would read, interests, surviving childhood, inheriting a field, someday being the reason two families stop feuding, skills, existing. As you grow, you're taught to sit quietly, not ask too many questions, and look marriageable, whatever that means, this decade. The stakes are high, the rewards are rarely yours, and the applause comes only if you sit still long enough for someone to promise you to a stranger. Welcome to Tudor England, where you're born with a job title and the job is future wife. And if you're lucky, you'll get a say in at least one decision whether to name your own daughter after yourself, so the whole cycle can start again. Let's move on, because in the Tudor world, childhood is just a brief commercial break before the main event. Engagement negotiations. You're still teething, but don't worry. Your parents are already deep in negotiations about who gets to call you wife one day. Betrothals happen before you learn the alphabet, because nothing says romantic commitment like two toddlers drooling at opposite ends of the same bench. Let's talk about the logistics of a Tudor baby betrothal. In the 16th century, a child's first milestones weren't marked with baby photos, but with legal contracts. While you're discovering your toes, your family is discovering whether Lord Snodgrass's second cousin twice removed has a son of approximately the correct age and, critically, approximately the correct number of goats. The process isn't subtle. It's less will they, won't they, and more they. Will, they must. And here's the deposit to prove it. This is where the concept of the dowry comes into play. Think of it as a starter kit for your future marriage. Except it's organized before you even know how to organize your own thoughts. Modern parents start college funds. Tudor parents start dowry funds, which are basically the same thing, except there's less math and more haggling over livestock. If you're highborn, your dowry is calculated with spreadsheets, ledgers, listing silver candlesticks, bolts of cloth, maybe a piece of good land, and the hope that your future in-laws are too polite to ask for a refund if you turn out left-handed. And if you're not so highborn, dowry is still a big deal, but it's more 3 chickens and a new churn than manor house and a tapestry. Either way, everyone in the village knows the stakes. A good dowry could mean the difference between your family climbing the social ladder and your future mother-in-law muttering about your lack of assets for the next decade. Your very existence is the currency in an ongoing negotiation that started with your grandparents and probably won't end until your great-great-grandkids are arguing over who gets the bigger chicken coop. Picture this. You're sitting in your cradle, gumming a wooden spoon, while 2 men in itchy woolen hose are negotiating your future happiness over ale. It's all very formal. There are witnesses, usually relatives, or sometimes that one neighbor who always volunteers to taste the ale, just to be safe. There's probably a notary who gets paid in eggs. Contracts are drawn up, and everyone nods solemnly, as if the baby, that is to say, you, has any say in the matter at all. You're drooling. Your would-be fiancé is drooling, and the only one who seems to understand what's happening is the family dog, who's already eyeing the leftover roast. And, of course, there's ceremony to all this. Once the agreements are made, gifts might be exchanged. A tiny ring slipped onto your baby finger, a swaddling blanket embroidered with both family crests, or even a commemorative cheese wheel, because nothing says forever like a slightly moldy dairy product. There might be a small feast where people congratulate your parents and try to ignore the fact that the bride-to-be is currently gnawing on the table. Why the rush? In Tudor England, marriage wasn't about love. It was about alliances, property, and ensuring your family against sudden disaster. The earlier you locked in a betrothal, the better your family's odds if, say, the harvest failed, or your local lord decided to raise taxes, or a plague swept through and made all the good sons mysteriously unavailable. It's a little like buying flood insurance, only instead of protecting your house, you're protecting your bloodline. So, while you're practicing your first steps, your parents are taking giant leaps on your behalf. Your future is decided before your baby teeth are, and the only say you get is whether you cry during the betrothal ceremony. Spoiler, you probably do, and so does the other kid. But that's the magic of Tudor romance. And with your betrothal secured, your life as a child bride in waiting begins. Next up, learning how to sit still while everyone speculates about your wedding day. A day that's penciled into your future before you've even learned to hold a pencil. Marriage isn't about love. It's about family strategy, livestock, and whether your father can finally settle that feud over a disputed turnip field. You, meanwhile, are just hoping today's porridge isn't moving. Welcome to the real Game of Thrones, the dining table. As a Tudor daughter, your primary function isn't to discover yourself, but to serve as a human treaty. Family strategy means that every relative, from your grandmother with the secret moustache to your cousin who's only ever seen daylight twice, is invested in your prospects. Every conversation is a tactical briefing. Forget how was your day. It's, do you think Lord Gristlepants would accept a slightly dented goat as part of the deal? As you slurp your breakfast, negotiations are already underway. Your mother is mentally reviewing every eligible boy within a 10-mile radius. Your father is still grumbling about how the price of sheep has gone up since that one neighbor's accident with a cart and a particularly bold pig. At the head of the table, your eldest brother is sulking, knowing he'll inherit the actual farm, while you're being weighed against 2 acres and an especially large sack of barley. It's all about value, and not just your value as a person, but as a bargaining chip. Your dowry, your health, your family's reputation, these are your stats. Think of it like a medieval video game, except you can't choose your own character, and the difficulty level is always set to impossible. Your parents don't say this out loud, but you see it in the way they count your teeth and mutter about the neighbor's daughter's shiny hair. You see it in the way they nudge you forward to recite prayers, sing a song, or display your ability to thread a needle with only minor blood loss. And then there's politics. Tudor England is less live, laugh, love, and more marry, merge, survive. If your father can marry you off to the miller's son, maybe you get free flour for life, and a built-in alibi when the tax collector comes calling. If he can snag a minor noble, it's new land, more sheep, and perhaps a chance to finally build that second outhouse. Every offer is weighed with the seriousness of a royal edict, even if the reality is you're trading one drafty cottage for another. Your mother handles the subtler negotiations, She'll invite the village ladies over for ale and gossip, sliding in veiled compliments about your embroidery. She only cried a little this time, and your capacity for hard work. She can carry water and almost never drops the prose bucket. She's not above exaggeration, especially if it means someone might consider your family for their next marital maneuver. You are praised for your meekness or, on days when you throw a tantrum, for your spirited nature. Code for she'll make a fine match in a parish far, far away. Even your siblings are part of the calculations. If you have a brother with a promising apprenticeship, that might bump you up a rung. If your uncle is the village fool, you might find yourself marrying the only suitor who's never seen a straight line in his life. Extended family can make or break the deal. And heaven help you if your family has a scandal, a lost pig, an unpaid tithe, or that one time Aunt Marjorie was caught chasing geese in her nightdress. Of course, none of this is about your own feelings. The question, do you love him, might as well be written in invisible ink. The real questions are, can he plough a straight furrow? And how many eggs did his mother bring to the last feast? Your personal happiness ranks somewhere below the status of last season's turnips. Meanwhile, you dream of a day when your future isn't decided by someone else's argument over root vegetables. For now, you nod and curtsy and try to ignore the fact that your family's ambitions rest on whether you can avoid sneezing in front of important guests. And as the sun rises over another day of bartering, you realize, in the grand Tudor marketplace, you're not just part of the family. You are the family bargain, whether you like it or not. Ready? Because next, it's time to face the music, education, etiquette, and the joys of being prepared for a wedding before you're tall enough to reach the cupboard. If you're lucky, your education consists of more than how to curtsy without falling over. You'll learn embroidery, a smattering of French, and the fine art of not rolling your eyes when old men call you young lady. But let's not get carried away. Education in Tudor England is less follow your dreams and more follow the stitching pattern. From the moment you can sit upright without toppling into the rushes, your training begins. It's not about unlocking your inner genius or discovering your life's passion. It's about not embarrassing the family at the next feast. And, if you can swing it, securing a marriage proposal from a suitor who doesn't chew with his mouth open. Your tutors are a rotating cast of relatives, parish priests, and that one aunt who insists on correcting your posture by poking you with the blunt end of a distaff. Your day starts with prayers, which are less about spiritual growth and more about rehearsing how to look pious in public. If you're really highborn, you might have a governess whose chief qualifications are speaking passable French, wielding a stern eyebrow, and the ability to appear out of thin air the moment you sneak a second scone. Reading and writing? Possible, but only if your parents are progressive, rich, or secretly hoping you'll pen witty thank you notes to future in-laws. You learn your letters with the same enthusiasm most children reserve for mud pies, because everyone knows too much reading is dangerous for a maiden's imagination. In truth, the only thing dangerous about books is that you might get caught reading one that isn't about saints, herbal remedies, or the correct way to run a household of 17 unruly servants. Arithmetic? Yes, just enough to count the stitches in your embroidery or the number of pence missing from the house account. Science? Only the science of keeping flowers alive long enough to impress the neighbors. Anything more advanced, and you risk developing notions. Notions are bad. Notions make you question why you're learning French if the only Frenchman you'll ever meet is the traveling cheese merchant. Then, of course, there's embroidery, the mainstay of the noble girl's curriculum. Embroidery isn't just a pastime, it's your passport to marriage, your family's resume, and a subtle way to broadcast your temperament to the world. Each sampler is scrutinized like it's an Olympic event. Uneven stitching? Clearly a sign of moral weakness. Intricate roses? A future duchess? No question. If you're not pricking your fingers twice an hour, are you even trying? Music is another must. You'll be taught to plink out a mournful ballad on the lute or, if you're unlucky, the recorder. Your audience consists of your parents, assorted suitors, and whichever household animal wanders through the parlor. You're expected to play sweetly, sing demurely, and never, under any circumstances, break into greensleeves for the 10th time in a row. That's just bad manners. Manners, by the way, are a full-time job. You practice your curtsy on floors so uneven they double as ankle-strengthening devices. You're drilled in the delicate arts of polite laughter, silent weeping, and listening to men tell the same hunting story over and over again. If you roll your eyes, you do it behind a tapestry. If you sigh, you blame the draft. You never, ever yawn in public unless you want your mother to give you the look, a look capable of wilting fresh flowers. There are lessons on conversation, which is really a series of instructions on how to be agreeable, how to say, "Oh, how fascinating," when someone explains crop rotation, and how to survive compliments on your fine, sturdy ankles without running for the hills. You learn the gentle art of small talk, which mostly means smiling while silently praying no one asks your opinion on anything more controversial than plum jam. Education, in this world, isn't about you. It's about preparing you to be useful to someone else. A future husband, a mother-in-law, or, if you're lucky, a slightly less insufferable noblewoman. And when the lessons are over, and your hands are cramped from stitching, and your mind is numb from reciting prayers, you get a brief moment to yourself. You stare out the window and wonder, just for a second, what it might be like to learn something for your own sake. Then you pick up your embroidery again, because you never know when someone will check your stitches and your worth all over again. Up next, daily chores, Tudor style, and why free time is just a rumor started by people with smaller laundry piles. There's no TikTok, no texting, and no escape. You spend your days fetching water, spinning wool, and perfecting the 1,000-yard stare that all future mothers-in-law will someday master. Let's talk about your daily to-do list. It starts at sunrise, which you will never see as romantic again. Your job? Whatever needs doing, and it always needs doing. Forget about sleeping in. Because in Tudor, England, beds are not for lounging, they're for collapsing into after a day of physical labor that would make even the most enthusiastic gym influencer reconsider their life choices. First up, water. 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 Everywhere. And not a drop in the house. Fetching it is an Olympic event for the under-16 crowd. You grab your wooden bucket, which weighs about as much as a toddler, and trudge to the nearest well, pond, or questionably fragrant stream. Your shoes, if you have any, are designed to channel mud directly into your socks. If you slip, congratulations. You get to wear your wet dress for the rest of the day. By the time you've lugged the water back, splashing only about half of it on your skirt and the neighbor's goose, you're awake, out of breath, and already slightly resentful of everyone born after indoor plumbing. Chores are never-ending. Once you're back inside, you're on wool patrol. Spinning wool is both an art form and a slow descent into madness. The spindle hums, your fingers ache, and stray fibers float into your nose, eyes, and occasionally your breakfast. You dream of the day someone invents a machine for this. But until then, it's you, your wheel, and an ever-growing pile of fleece that smells faintly of barnyard and shattered dreams. Even the cat is bored watching you. Next, it's time for food prep. If you thought Tudor kitchens were all roasted boar and elaborate pies, think again. Your menu is root vegetables, cabbage, and whatever can be boiled into a state of confusion. You chop, stir, and add just enough salt to avoid a revolt. You also bake bread, so dense it could be used as a doorstop, or, in emergencies, a weapon. If your loaf turns out lopsided, don't worry, the local chickens will appreciate the snack, even if your family doesn't. Cleaning is a Sisyphean task. There's always more dirt. Sweeping is less about achieving clean and more about redistributing the mud into new and interesting corners of the house. The floor is made of packed earth, so no matter how much you sweep, it always looks like you're living in a potato sack. Windows? You'd be lucky to have any. Most are just holes with oily cloth, expertly designed to let in the cold and keep out absolutely nothing. Laundry day is the stuff of nightmares. There's no gentle cycle, no lavender detergent, and certainly no Instagrammable line drying in the Sunday. Instead, you haul water, again, scrub clothes on a board that doubles as a cheese grater, and pray the stains come out. Spoiler, they don't. Your knuckles are permanently pruned, and your one nice dress now features a medley of mysterious splatters, each with its own backstory. If you think chores end at the threshold, think again. The barn and garden beckon. You help muck out stalls, chase chickens with the confidence of someone who's been pecked before, and weed the garden until you can recite the root systems of every local plant from memory. Child labor laws? Never heard of them. Your reward for a day's work is often a crust of bread, a nod of approval, and the privilege of waking up to do it all again tomorrow. All the while, you're expected to smile politely if visitors drop by, unless you're too busy pretending you don't exist, so no one asks you to show off your embroidery, your manners, or your ability to recite a psalm while balancing a basket of onions. There is no escape. Only brief moments of daydreaming as you stare into the middle distance, mentally planning your next escape, which, in true Tudor fashion, usually involves moving to the next room. Welcome to your life. Equal parts exhausting, repetitive, and absurdly unfair. And just think, this is only the beginning. Next up, fashion, where the only thing more uncomfortable than your dress is the realization that you're expected to keep it spotless. Your wardrobe is mostly linen, some wool, and whatever color is least likely to show dirt or tears. If you're really lucky, you get shoes that fit before your feet stop growing. Let's get straight to it. Tudor fashion is less about expressing yourself and more about expressing that you haven't yet lost a fight with the family goose. Forget the ball gowns of your historical drama dreams. Instead, picture layers. So many layers. The first is a shift, a plain, long linen underdress that acts as your only real barrier between your body and all the questionable substances that life in a Tudor house has to offer. It is your pajamas, your undershirt, your emergency tissue, and, most of the time, the only thing standing between you and the worst rashes of your life. Over this, you wear a kirtle, which is like a sturdy apron that's been promoted to full-time employment. The kirtle is laced, sometimes front, sometimes side, depending on your family's taste in inconvenience. Then comes the gown, if you're lucky enough to own one. For most, it's a well-loved, well-patched item passed down through a suspicious number of older siblings and cousins, each of whom has left behind a legacy of mysterious stains and creative repairs. Don't get attached to color. Bright dyes are expensive and tend to fade faster than your enthusiasm for spinning wool. Most child brides are swathed in earth tones: brown, dull green, washed, out blue. Nature's palette of please don't notice this stain. If you're a noble, maybe you get something in red or a muted gold, but even then, it comes with the caveat: only wear this when guests are over, and for heaven's sake, don't sit too close to the fire. Fashion is about survival, not flair. Then there's the all-important apron. Your apron isn't cute, it's armor. Its main function is to keep your one good dress marginally cleaner while you haul water, pluck chickens, and try to avoid whatever's leaking from the roof today. The apron is the Tudor version of a superhero cape. You put it on, and suddenly you're invincible, or at least slightly less likely to ruin your clothes before noon. Accessories are practical, if they exist at all. Hair is kept covered by a coif, which is basically a linen bonnet designed to keep your locks and the local lice population neatly in place. The coif is also the perfect way to advertise that you're respectable, or at least that your mother checks up on you before you leave the house. Jewelry? Only if you're rich. And even then, it's likely to be a family heirloom, slightly tarnished and guarded with the intensity of modern teenagers' phone password. Now, let's talk shoes, assuming you have them. Shoes are luxury items. If you own a pair, you guard them like the crown jewels. Most are made of hard leather and shaped like they were designed for someone else's foot in a hurry. Blisters are not a fashion statement. They're just part of life. Outgrow your shoes and you might find yourself stuffing your toes in or wearing them with the backs flattened out. A Tudor take on Crocs in sport mode. If you don't have shoes, welcome to barefoot living, complete with mud, thorns, and the constant surprise of just how cold the floor can get. Washing your clothes is a project worthy of its own epic poem. It's a struggle with water, lye, and brute force. And the clothes never really smell clean, just less bad. The more delicate items are washed by hand. The rest, if they're lucky, get beaten against a rock and left to dry in the wind, occasionally stolen by a passing animal or an ambitious sibling. Dressing each morning is not about looking your best. It's about minimizing discomfort and maximizing your odds of not being yelled at for getting muddy before breakfast. It's a strategic game of layers, patches, and prayers. And that's Tudor fashion for you. No runways, just muddy paths. No designer labels, just the label your grandmother stitched in so she could keep track of who wore it last. Up next, the joys of puberty in a world where privacy is what happens when you're sent outside to chase the chickens. Forget privacy. In Tudor, England, everyone, your family, your neighbors, the local pig, knows when you start blossoming. It's less of a personal milestone, more of a public service announcement. Imagine your awkward years, the ones modern kids get to spend hiding under hoodies, played out in a single-room cottage where the entire household is basically waiting for you to sprout. There are no doors to slam, no headphones to hide behind. Just a chorus of aunties, siblings, and livestock watching with a kind of fascinated horror as you transform from grubby child to eligible maiden. The minute you hit your first growth spurt, there's a lot less "how's your homework?" and a lot more "so, any nice boys in church today?" Let's get one thing straight. Puberty in Tudor, England is not a private affair. Your body is now community property. The minute your dress starts fitting differently or you show the faintest hint of a curve, the gossip mill fires up faster than the church bells before a royal wedding. Your mother inspects you daily like a prized pumpkin at harvest time. And any signs of change, freckles, height, mysterious new smells, are carefully noted and, if possible, discussed with neighbors. The word subtle is not in the Tudor vocabulary. And if you think you'll be allowed to process these changes in peace, think again. Your family takes the "it takes a village" approach very seriously. Suddenly, everyone has an opinion about your skin, your hair, and whether you're eating enough turnips to support healthy growth. Some relatives even keep a mental tally of who started puberty first, you or that annoying girl down the lane. Spoiler, if it's you, you're now the talk of the market square. If it's not, your mother is quietly devastated and blaming the water. Of course, the real reason all this attention is on you isn't curiosity, it's business. The sooner you come of age, the sooner you're considered ready to be betrothed in earnest. Suitors start sniffing around the house like particularly persistent hounds, and the adults whisper about dowries and alliances every time you leave the room. Your body isn't just growing, it's accruing value, like a Tudor version of a stock rising on the marriage market. And with every passing month, the pressure mounts. The age of puberty is seen as a sign from the universe, well, from the local priest, your grandmother, and sometimes even the sheep, that it's time to start thinking about your future, which, for the record, is a euphemism for wedding. There are no sweet 16 parties, just a lot pointed glances at your sewing and a crash course in how to avoid looking bored during dinner with potential in-laws. Let's not forget the fun of explaining all these changes with zero scientific context. No one's handing out health pamphlets. Instead, you get a blend of folk wisdom and utter guesswork. Got a spotty complexion? That's the humours. Cramps? God's way of toughening you up. Booming voice or gangly limbs. A sign of strong blood, whatever that means. And if you're unlucky enough to have an older sibling, they'll take every opportunity to tease you about your new responsibilities, which mostly involve not embarrassing the family in front of guests. Meanwhile, your own feelings about all this, confusion, embarrassment, existential dread, aren't up for discussion. You're expected to take it all in stride, just like your mother and her mother before her. There's no comfort food, no teen magazine, just an endless parade of knowing looks and cryptic advice about becoming a woman. If you do manage to sneak away for a moment of quiet, it's usually to the corner of the garden, only to be chased out by the chickens and the neighbour's curious toddler. Puberty in Tudor England is a public event, and you're the main attraction, whether you want to be or not. Next up, the joys of Tudor nutrition and how to keep growing when your entire diet consists of bread, broth, and hope. Nutrition advice is simple. Eat what's there. Meals are heavy on bread, light on flavour, and occasionally interrupted by a rat. Cravings are for queens. Welcome to the Tudor table, less a culinary experience, more a daily episode of Survivor, Rural Edition. If you're expecting balanced meals or superfoods, prepare for disappointment. There are no avocado toasts, no vitamins, and absolutely no one talking about gut health. Your diet is determined by the seasons, your social class, and the relative mood of the family cow. Breakfast is, generously, whatever didn't get eaten or carried off by mice the night before. If you're lucky, it's a hunk of yesterday's bread, so stale you risk losing a tooth. If you're extra lucky, there's some weak pottage, a gruel-like stew made by boiling whatever was found in the garden until it loses the will to live. Think turnips, cabbage, and if the stars align, a single sad carrot. Protein, only on holidays, market days, or if a chicken is feeling particularly slow and you happen to be quicker than your siblings. Meat is scarce, precious, and heavily guarded. The family pig is more valuable alive than in the pot, and eggs are considered both breakfast and an investment portfolio. If you get cheese, it's usually hard enough to be used as a doorstop, and you carve off shavings carefully to avoid sparks. Most of the time, the centerpiece of every meal is bread. Not fluffy, fresh-baked loaves with golden crusts, but dense, dark, slightly mysterious bricks made from barley, rye, or whatever grain was left after paying rent to the landlord. Sometimes it's padded out with beans, oats, or even ground-up peas. If the harvest was bad, and it usually was, there's a risk of hungry bread. A delightful Tudor specialty where the filler is sawdust, ground acorns, or anything else not actively trying to run away. The good news? It's very high in fiber. The bad news? Your teeth may never forgive you. For hydration, You drink small ale, which is just a polite way of saying water we boiled to make sure it didn't kill us, then made slightly alcoholic for morale. Even children get a mug. Water straight from the well is for the brave or the desperate, especially if you live downstream from the neighbor's pigs. Sometimes there's milk, but it sours quickly and is saved for butter if there's any left after the village cats have helped themselves. Fruit and vegetables are a seasonal treat. In spring, it's bitter greens and herbs. In summer, you might snag a handful of berries before the birds do. Autumn means apples, plums, and pears. Unless you blink and miss the 2-day window between unripe and fermented. Winter is a bleak parade of turnips, onions, and whatever you manage to pickle before the cellar froze solid. Forget dessert unless you count eating raw honey by the spoonful and getting a stern lecture from your mother. The highlight of any week is pottage night, when the communal pot on the hearth is topped up with whatever can be scrounged. It's less a recipe and more a tradition of not asking questions. If you find a small bone or a beetle, you just count yourself lucky it's not bigger. Flavors blend into a single brown note of food. Salt is rare. Spices are for nobility. And anything sweet is guarded with the same intensity as a modern parent with a stash of secret chocolate. So, your job as a child bride is simple. Eat what you're given, be grateful if it's warm, and try to ignore the fact that everyone is watching to see if you'll finally eat for two. No pressure. There's no snacking between meals, unless you count stealing peas from the garden, and no midnight fridge raids. Just the sound of your stomach negotiating with your dignity until breakfast. Next up, the fine art of survival, dodging illness, outlasting famine, and why making it to your next meal is sometimes the biggest achievement of all. Between smallpox, measles, and suspicious coughs, making it to age 12 is a minor miracle. If you do, congratulations. You're ready for marriage, apparently. Let's be honest, Tudor childhood is not for the faint of heart or lungs or really any organ you hope to keep functioning past the age of 10. Forget running wild in the fields or climbing trees just for fun. Every day is a negotiation with fate and an ongoing challenge not to become the next tragic village anecdote. Your odds? Not great. Statistically, almost half of all children don't survive to see their 12th birthday. This means your childhood is less about innocence and more about speed-running your bucket list before the bucket itself kicks you. Let's start with the classics. Smallpox is the all-star villain of the era, arriving uninvited, staying too long, and leaving its mark on everyone it meets. If you catch it and survive, you'll have the scars to prove it, plus a new respect for avoiding anyone who so much as sneezes in your general direction. Measles and mumps are the supporting cast, cropping up every few years to test the strength of your family's immune system and the depth of your mother's worry lines. There's also the ever-popular sweating sickness, a Tudor specialty, notorious for striking without warning and taking no prisoners. Modern medicine? Unheard of. The family doctor is probably the same person who sharpens the knives and brews ale in the afternoons. But germs aren't your only enemy. Every season brings its own special brand of peril. In winter, you risk freezing indoors. Your home has more drafts than a poorly edited screenplay, and even the family dog looks at you as a possible heat source. In spring, the roads turn to mud, and the mud turns to quicksand, swallowing shoes, dignity, and occasionally small siblings. Summer means flies, fevers, and the annual surprise of which food will try to poison you with bad humors. And autumn, the harvest brings blisters, bee stings, and, if you're not careful, accidental encounters with farm equipment that has only ever been described as rusty and mysterious. Every day is an obstacle course. If you're not dodging disease, you're dodging the village bullies, wild animals, and the local goose who has a personal vendetta against children. You play games with sticks and stones, which is cute until someone loses a tooth. You learn early on never to drink water downstream from the neighbor's pigs, never to trust a mushroom you didn't see picked, and never, ever to interrupt a grown-up when they're counting chickens. Injuries are frequent. First aid is rudimentary. If you break a bone, the treatment is splints, prayers, and a very real chance you'll limp for life. Then there's the ever-present threat of famine. If the harvest fails, or the livestock falls sick, everyone tightens their belts, literally and figuratively. Meals get smaller, tempers get shorter, and suddenly even that mystery bread you once mocked is starting to look like a delicacy. Your parents become experts in culinary improvisation, finding ways to make a single turnip feed 6 people and a goat. If you get sick, the remedies are creative. Leeching, poultices, and herbal concoctions handed down through generations. Some work, most don't. Your best hope is that the illness runs its course before your patients, or your parents' supply of woolen blankets, runs out. If things get dire, the local priest is called, not for comfort, but to start preparing for your eternal soul. No pressure. Yet somehow, some children do survive. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's sheer stubbornness. If you make it to 12, you get a party, a small one, just in case you jinx it. And then, just when you think you've earned a little rest, the real news drops. You're of age. Translation: you've passed the survival test, so now you get to start all over again as a bride. Up next, betrothal blunders, awkward engagements, and why Tudor romance always comes with a side of property negotiations. Sometimes the paperwork doesn't match, the dowry vanishes, or your future groom dies in a tragic livestock incident. The drama, the lawsuits, the vague sense of relief. Let's be honest, in Tudor England, getting betrothed is a little like assembling furniture from instructions written in Old French. Something will go wrong, and nobody agrees on which part you're supposed to sit on. The stakes are high, and the players, parents, neighbors, notaries, the odd sheep are even higher. For every successful match, there's an entire cast of near misses, almosts, and spectacular failures. Sometimes it starts with the paperwork. If you thought bureaucracy was invented in the 20th century, think again. Marriage contracts in the 1500s are notorious for their loopholes, ink smudges, and creative spelling. One misplaced name, and suddenly you're engaged to the wrong cousin. Again, the priest sighs. Your parents argue over who forgot to bring the correct parchment, and someone's great-uncle begins reminiscing about the last time this happened. Spoiler, it ended with a goat in the belfry. Dowries, meanwhile, are a minefield. That promising pile of silver coins? Oops. It was just a box of buttons and the good candlestick you're technically supposed to return after Christmas. Cattle get sick, land boundaries move in the night, and sometimes the sheep you were promised as part of your new life just wanders off. If your father gets swindled, he'll spend the next decade muttering about the dowry disaster at every family meal. And if your mother is responsible for the blunder, you can expect her to blame the stars, the moon, or, most likely, the neighbor's bad energy. But the real fun begins when people start dying unexpectedly. A future groom trampled by an over-enthusiastic pig. A bride's family struck down by food poisoning at the betrothal feast. Or the classic, someone disappears on a pilgrimage and is never seen again, except maybe as a distant rumor in the next parish. When this happens, everyone springs into action. There are lawsuits, or their Tudor equivalent, which mostly involves shouting in front of a magistrate, hastily drafted new contracts, and much awkwardness at the Sunday market. Let's not forget the social fallout. A broken engagement is more than a family drama. It's a village-wide spectacle. Everyone has an opinion, and most of them are shouted across the fields. Old women gather at the well to speculate on whose fault it was, while children invent rhymes about the failed union. Sometimes the scandal is enough to tank your marriage prospects for years, or at least until someone else's disaster steals the spotlight. For the unlucky bride, these blunders mean more than just embarrassment. You might be left on the shelf, with your family trying to salvage your reputation and your father discreetly lowering your dowry expectations. Or you could find yourself hastily promised to someone else entirely, usually a little older, a lot stranger, and with mysterious stains on his shoes. In some cases, though, a broken engagement is cause for secret celebration. Maybe your intended was 30 years older, or known for his bad breath and worse poetry. There's a certain joy in watching a pig take matters into its own hooves. But even amidst the chaos, life rolls on. Parents regroup, feasts are repurposed, and another round of negotiations begins. If there's one thing Tudor society excels at, it's making the best of a botched arrangement. Someone always stands to gain from the mix-up, even if it's just the notary who gets paid to draw up another contract. In the end, betrothal blunders are as much a part of Tudor childhood as pottage and lice. They're the stories told in whispers around the hearth and the punchlines to family jokes that last for generations. If you survive the embarrassment, you might even get another shot at engagement, hopefully with all the livestock accounted for this time. Next up, meeting your future husband. Will sparks fly, or will you just wish you were back at the Blonde Furnace? Well, with the gossiping old women? Let's find out. He's probably older, possibly much older, and he definitely smells like a mix of mutton, wet wool, and pipe smoke. You smile politely and try not to sneeze. Meeting your future husband is not a romantic event. There's no sweeping orchestral music, no candlelight, and certainly no flirtatious banter. Instead, picture a small, chilly room crowded with your entire extended family, several curious neighbors, and at least one livestock animal who has wandered in to see what all the fuss is about. You've spent the morning being scrubbed within an inch of your life and shoehorned into your best dress, the one that doesn't itch quite as much and has the fewest obvious patches. You're perched on a wooden bench, practicing all the polite smiles you know, while your mother hisses at you to sit up straight and look grateful. The door creaks open, and in walks your intended, a man with the knees of someone who's knelt through too many long church services and the complexion of boiled turnip. If you're very lucky, he's only a decade or so older. If you're not, he's old enough to remember the last time the plague came to town. Introductions are made. They're never as simple as "This is John." It's John, eldest son of that family from 3 villages over, who owns 2 cows, 1 ox, and that surprisingly nice piece of land near the stream. He bows stiffly. You curtsy, then immediately regret it because you nearly trip over your hem. He chuckles. The adults laugh too, a little too loudly. Your cheeks flush, but you're not sure if it's embarrassment or the start of a stress rash. Conversation is painfully formal. You're asked questions you can't answer. Do you enjoy the turnip harvest? How are your needlework skills? Would you say your constitution is robust in the winter? While your father and future father-in-law eye each other over the top of their mugs. No one cares if you have hobbies or dreams. The only thing anyone wants to know is whether you can bear children and cook a stew without poisoning half the parish. The man himself is just as nervous. Maybe he's been married before. Maybe he's lost a previous wife to fever or, more likely, boredom. He tries to make conversation, asks about your favorite saint, comments on the weather, or, in a desperate move, compliments your ability to balance a basket on your head. You both try to look interested, but you're silently wondering if your life would be easier as a nun. The one highlight: at least he doesn't bring up politics, livestock diseases, or his personal philosophy on bread crust. And then comes the inspection. Your future mother-in-law circles you like a particularly judgmental goose. She pokes your arm, strong bones, good for carrying water, peers at your hair. Have you ever had lice? 2a. And asks about your ability to rise before dawn. There's a moment where she seems almost pleased. Then she asks about your dowry, just to keep you humble. If the meeting goes well, you might share a cup of small ale and a piece of questionable cheese. If it goes badly, you still share the ale, but with more pointed stares from your parents. You're not expected to fall in love, or even to like this man. You just have to get through the meeting without fainting, sneezing on his shoes, or admitting you've never actually milked a cow by yourself. As the visit wraps up, there's awkward silence and a lot of forced smiling. You exchange polite goodbyes, wondering if you'll ever get used to his moustache, assuming he has one. If not, his lack of one will become the next family debate topic. As the door closes, your mother immediately quizzes you for your impressions, as if you were shopping for a new cloak instead of a lifelong partner. And just like that, you're one step closer to your wedding, whether it's dread, resignation, or a tiny flicker of hope. You settle in for whatever comes next, probably more meetings, more questions, and, if you're lucky, slightly fresher mutton. Next up, the wedding day itself, because if you thought meeting your future husband was awkward, wait until you see what they expect you to wear for the ceremony. Your wedding is a grand affair if your parents have money, or a slightly damp family gathering if they don't. Either way, you're front and center, wishing you could swap places with the family goat. Let's set the scene. You wake before dawn, not out of excitement, but because your mother insists you need extra time for scrubbing, hair, braiding, and at least 3 lectures about dignity. Your dress is laid out. If your family is wealthy, it's an elaborate gown in your best color, which means whatever dye was on sale at the market. If you're less fortunate, your dress is just the cleanest one you own, recently patched to hide last week's mysterious stain. Either way, you feel like you're being trussed up for market. By mid-morning, the house is full of relatives, some you haven't seen since you were teething, all suddenly experts on how a wedding should be. Aunt Marjorie has opinions on your hair. Uncle Richard is already testing the ale. Your younger siblings run underfoot, convinced that this is all a setup for free pastries. Outside, the family goat watches with faint amusement as you try to sit perfectly still while your mother fusses with your coif for the 10th time. The guest list is flexible. Anyone within shouting distance is invited. The church bells ring, summoning not just your family but half the parish, including every neighbor who's ever borrowed a shovel or complained about your father's rooster. The ceremony is a public event, complete with a full lineup of hecklers, criers, and local gossips ready to judge everything from your posture to the way your betrothed holds your hand. The church itself is drafty, decorated with whatever wildflowers could be scavenged, and packed wall to wall. You try to focus on the priest's words, but your mind is busy cataloguing how many people will later discuss the unfortunate noise your stomach made during the vows. Your groom stands at the front, looking like he's either about to faint or run for the hills, or both. You exchange glances, silently agreeing that whatever comes next, you're both too tired to object. If you're lucky, your hands are steady during the vows. If not, there's always a moment of comedy when the rings refuse to go on, or when someone, often your little brother, loudly asks if you're allowed to change your mind. The local children giggle, the old women nod in approval, or shake their heads with barely concealed delight at your nervous fumble. The priest blesses the union, perhaps adding a few extra prayers just in case. Then comes the walk back to the house, parade style. Everyone is watching, Some toss petals, others just stare. The family goat, again, looks like it would rather be anywhere else, and you're tempted to follow. At the feast, tables groan under the weight of whatever the family could afford or barter for. There's bread, cheese, questionable ale, and, if it's a truly grand occasion, roast meats and candied fruits. If you're not so lucky, it's more bread, turnips, and a single meat pie cut into pieces so small you'd need a magnifying glass to identify the filling. Toasts are made, often with more enthusiasm than accuracy, and someone always tells a slightly inappropriate story about a past wedding gone awry. As the evening wears on, the mood shifts. There's laughter, singing, and maybe a little dancing, depending on how many people are willing to risk tripping on the rush-strewn floor. You're congratulated, hugged, pinched, and occasionally offered advice you never wanted. The stars come out, the guests eventually stumble home, and you're left with a head full of noise, a heart somewhere between hope and panic. And then, at last, as the house quiets down and you're ushered toward your new life, you realize you made it through the day. The goat is still free, and so, in a way, are you, at least for one last night. Next. The ceremony's not over until you reach the bridal chamber, where awkwardness waits and privacy is just a rumor. You say your vows in front of everyone you've ever met, plus a few chickens. The priest blesses your union, and you try not to trip over your too long dress. Let's start with the basics. Privacy is a myth. The Tudor wedding ceremony is the original open invite event. The church is packed with relatives, friends, neighbors, nosy children, livestock, and at least 3 people who are only here for the free bread. It's standing room only, unless you're a chicken, in which case you have the best seat in the house, right next to the altar, preening yourself for the bride's big moment. The priest stands front and center, shuffling parchments and quietly praying that this goes better than the last wedding he officiated, which featured a runaway pig and a minor scandal involving a dropped candle. The air is thick with incense, dust, and the nervous energy of 2 families about to become one. The ceremony starts with a hymn, sung with varying enthusiasm and accuracy. You're wedged between your parents, clutching a posy and willing your knees not to buckle. Vows are recited. If you're lucky, you've practiced them at least once. If not, you're winging it, hoping you remember the words and don't accidentally pledge yourself to the wrong person, or, heaven forbid, to a nearby chicken. Your groom's voice cracks on the for richer, for poorer part. Your own voice wobbles as you try to project dignity and not trip over the hem of your only decent dress. Every eye is on you, including the local gossip who is already cataloguing every slip for later retelling at the well. Witnesses are required, not just for legal reasons, but for drama. The older women in the Creed B front row squint suspiciously, making sure you don't look too happy, a sure sign of witchcraft, or too miserable, bad luck for the new in-laws. Your best friend stands just behind you, giving you subtle nods of encouragement, while your little brother is whispering to the neighbor about how you once fell in the pond and nearly drowned. Thank you, little brother. There's a moment for exchanging rings, assuming your families could afford one, and it fits. Sometimes it's just a plain metal band. Sometimes it's a borrowed family heirloom with a mysterious dent. You slip it on, silently hoping this ring won't end up on display in the church's lost and found box next to the sheep bell and a spoon from last year's bake sale. After the vows come the blessings. The priest launches into a long prayer, occasionally pausing to glare at the chickens making suspicious noises behind the altar. The blessings cover everything: fertility, health, the harvest, the hope that no one curses your marriage by sneezing at the wrong time. It's part ritual, part community theatre, and the audience is judging your performance like their future bread depends on it. And then, the religious worries set in. Did you cross yourself at the right moment? Did your new spouse say "I do" with enough conviction? Is the local priest secretly judging your family's tithing habits? Even the weather gets a say. Rain on your wedding day is considered both bad luck and good luck, depending on which old woman you ask. You can't win, but you can at least survive. The ceremony ends with a chorus of congratulations, some more genuine than others. The priest shakes your hand, hands you a slightly damp certificate, if you're lucky, and blesses your union with a final sprinkle of holy water, also soaking the nearest chicken, who takes it as a personal insult. Everyone piles outside for the traditional barrage of advice, warnings, and slightly off-key singing. You're finally married. Your family is beaming, or weeping, or both. And the church is already filling up for the next big event. Possibly a christening, possibly another wedding, definitely another round of gossip. Next up, the dreaded bridal chamber. Awkward, public, and proof that privacy is just something invented centuries later. Now for the most awkward part of all. You're sent off to a room with your new husband, while your family listens at the door to make sure the marriage is consummated. No pressure. If you thought the ceremony was public, the wedding feast was exhausting, and the priest's blessing was long. Congratulations! Now comes the main event, and it's got the privacy of a train station at rush hour. In Tudor, England, wedding nights are not about romance or candlelit whispers. They're about paperwork, protocol, and a crowd of relatives whose idea of support is standing within earshot to verify your marriage is, let's say, official. You're ushered into the bridal chamber, which is usually a stuffy room with a lumpy straw mattress, a faded tapestry of something that might be a deer, and exactly 0 places to hide. The air smells faintly of old bread and candle wax. You and your new husband exchange glances, equal parts terror, confusion, and a shared hope that someone will come up with an excuse to delay things just a bit longer. There is absolutely no guidebook for this. The only advice you got was from your mother. And it was so vague and terrifying, you're not sure if it even applies to humans. And then, just as you're settling in, the door is only mostly closed. That's because outside, sometimes literally pressed to the wood, is your family, his family, and at least one nosy neighbor. They're there for witnessing, a custom that manages to combine community building with maximum humiliation. Some families are content to wait quietly in the hall. Others provide commentary, encouragement, or sing songs to set the mood. If you're really unlucky, there's a toast. And no, you can't just slip out the window. For the newlyweds, there's an unspoken agreement. Make this as quick and as quiet as possible. The pressure is overwhelming. There are stories, half joke, half warning, of parents bursting in to check the sheets or sending in a midwife to assist. Nothing says romance like your great-aunt shuffling around outside with a lantern, waiting for proof of the new union. The traditions don't end there. In some households, there's a ceremonial undressing, where the new wife is prepared for bed by a flock of giggling cousins, all of whom seem to have missed the day in etiquette school about personal space. Your nightgown is tugged into place, your hair is unbraided, and you're deposited onto the mattress like a particularly anxious potato. And then there's the bedding itself. Scratchy wool blankets, lumpy pillows, and the ever-present sound of mice doing laps in the rafters. The mattress is a negotiation between comfort and suspicious odors, and every time you shift, the straw creaks just loudly enough to be heard by the eager audience in the hallway. Your new husband, meanwhile, is no Don Juan. He's probably as terrified as you, clutching the edge of the blanket like it's a shield. Eventually, the crowd gets bored or reassured by some mysterious sign, and they drift away to the kitchen for leftovers and fresh gossip. The door closes at last, and you're left with a room that feels too big, too quiet, and a future that just got a lot more real. You and your new spouse might even manage a short, whispered conversation about the weather, the family goat, or how quickly you can fall asleep and put an end to the world's most awkward night. If all goes well, there's even a check of the linens in the morning, a medieval version of reality TV's worst challenge. For some, it's a badge of honor. For others, it's just one more thing to survive. Either way, you're married now, watched, weighed, and woven into the complicated social web of Tudor life. Next, surviving your new in-laws, where the real challenge isn't the wedding night, it's breakfast, and your mother-in-law has opinions. Suddenly, you're the new girl in a house where the real boss is your husband's mother. She's seen it all, and she's got opinions about everything from your cooking to your posture. Let's be clear. Moving in with your new family isn't the start of a honeymoon. It's the beginning of the world's longest job interview. Only instead of a paycheck, your rewards are nods of approval, less eye-rolling, and the privilege of occasionally stirring the stew without being corrected. The hierarchy of the Tudor household is simple. At the top, your mother-in-law; below her, everyone else, including your new husband, whose main role is to agree with whichever woman currently has the bigger wooden spoon. She greets you at sunrise, already dressed, already judging. Breakfast is your first test. Did you stir the porridge clockwise? Is the bread sliced thick enough, but not too thick? You don't know the answers because the answers change daily, depending on the weather, her mood, and whether the family cat has gotten into the pantry again. If she says help yourself, it's a trap. What she means is wait to be offered, and if you take the last piece, expect it to be mentioned for years. You quickly learn that your new mother-in-law has a memory like a ledger. Every minor mistake is lovingly recorded for future reference. Did you forget to curtsy? Her neighbor stopped by. Marked down. Spill a bit of ale on the tablecloth? Noted. Did you yawn before the bell finished ringing for morning prayers? She'll mention it, quietly, in front of everyone, twice. There are daily lessons in etiquette. Walk softly, speak gently, never let the chickens inside, even if your own mother said it was fine. She corrects your posture by tapping your back with the same spoon she uses for porridge, which is both confusing and slightly terrifying. You're expected to agree with her stories about how things used to be, all of which sound suspiciously exaggerated, and laugh at her jokes. Even the ones that end with, "and that's why we never trust anyone from the next village." Kitchen duty is her kingdom. You might have helped your mother at home, but here, every task comes with strict instructions, subtle tests, and the underlying threat that if you get it wrong, you'll be reassigned to the goose shed detail. When she says season to taste, she means her taste, which is best described as a pinch of salt and a heaping scoop of nostalgia. If she compliments your stew, the entire house pauses, stunned. If she doesn't, it becomes the story she tells at every feast until the next harvest. There's also the constant comparison to her own youthful glory days. When I was your age, I could churn butter, mend a shirt, and shoo 3 foxes away before breakfast. You nod politely, wondering if she's ever actually seen a fox, or if this is just part of the ongoing campaign to keep you humble. And don't forget the other in-laws. Sisters, cousins, the old uncle who lives by the fire and mumbles about his missing boots. They all follow your mother-in-law's lead. Impress her, and you might earn a grudging respect. Displease her, and you'll spend your days peeling root vegetables while listening to stories of brides who never lasted through winter. Yet, beneath it all, there's a strange comfort. She's tough, but she's survived this long for a reason. Over time, if you learn her ways, there's the possibility, just a hint, that you'll be folded into the family tapestry, with your own stories and opinions to pass down. But until then, you watch, listen, and try to avoid the goose shed. Next up, domestic drudgery. Spoiler, being a Tudor wife isn't all home-cooked meals and cozy evenings. It's work. So much work. Your responsibilities now include cleaning, cooking, and producing as many children as your body can manage. Breaks? Those are for people who aren't in a Tudor household. Welcome to the daily grind. Tudor edition. You may have once dreamed of married life as a noble's wife, sipping mead in the garden, but reality is a never-ending relay race, from one exhausting task to the next. Your new job description: household CEO, full-time line cook, part-time nurse, amateur midwife, professional chicken wrangler, and, if you're very unlucky, rat chaser. First up, cleaning. There's no deep clean because, frankly, the dirt is already deep. You sweep floors made of packed earth, occasionally layered with rushes and last year's straw. Each sweep is less about cleaning and more about redistributing dust and bits of turnip peel so they're less visible when company arrives. The windows are made of oiled cloth, letting in just enough light to see the new stains on the wall. If you want fresh air, your only option is to open the door and invite in a breeze, 3 chickens, and a curious neighbor. Then comes laundry. In Tudor England, this is an endurance sport. You drag everything to the river, rub it with soap so harsh it might as well be sandpaper, then whack it against a rock while praying your knuckles survive the process. Clothing is washed infrequently, because each time feels like a small battle with the elements. You quickly learn the secret art of spot cleaning, known today as scrubbing just enough to claim plausible deniability. Next, cooking. You cook for a household that seems to expand with every meal, fueled by in-laws, visitors, and whoever wandered in looking for a free bowl of pottage. Your ingredients are whatever survived the cellar and hasn't grown suspicious fuzz. Meal prep means boiling root vegetables until they surrender, thickening stews with anything handy, and stretching a single chicken over 3 days, 2 soups, and 1 communal prayer for leftovers. Seasoning is prepped limited, a pinch of salt if you're lucky, and wild herbs if you're brave. If you're not chopping, stirring, or kneading, you're producing children. A job so relentless it deserves its own calendar. Each new baby is greeted with relief, celebration, and a fresh round of anxiety. The local midwife knows your home as well as you do, and every year you manage without a new arrival is a year someone starts muttering about your fitness. No pressure. Then there's childcare. Your toddlers toddle among the chickens and firewood. Older kids help with chores, sometimes helpfully, often less so. You patch clothes, mend socks, wipe noses, and negotiate peace treaties over the last crust of bread. Children in Tudor England are expected to grow up fast. By age 5, they're hauling water, herding geese, and occasionally getting lost in the linen chest. You keep an eye on them all, knowing that, statistically, only about half will survive to adulthood. Your day is broken up by 100 small tasks: tending the fire, fetching water, emptying chamber pots, smoothing ruffled feathers, literally and metaphorically. There's no me time. If you want a moment alone, your best bet is to pretend you're looking for eggs in the barn and hope no one follows. And all the while, the house itself demands attention. There are leaks to plug, drafts to block, mice to outwit, and, at least once a season, a neighbor to lend a hand when the roof collapses after a particularly robust rooster fight. At the end of the day, you collapse onto a lumpy mattress, hands raw, hair full of straw, dreaming only of a morning where someone else makes the bread. But you know it won't happen, at least not until your daughter is old enough to take over the drudgery herself. Next, health hazards, home remedies, and why Tudor medicine is just a polite word for creative suffering. Feeling sick? There's a poultice for that, made of moss, butter, and probably a prayer. The local doctor has leeches, but not much else. Welcome to Tudor Healthcare, where half the treatments sound like ingredients for a questionable casserole, and the other half could be summed up as good luck. Medical knowledge in the 16th century is, at best, an optimistic guess. Doctors believe the body is governed by 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that good health is just a matter of balancing your inner soup. If you're feverish, you've got too much blood. Solution: let's drain some out. Got a rash? That's your humours acting up again. Time for a concoction of crushed snails and a brisk jog around the church. For most ailments, the cures come from the same woman who helped deliver half the village and brews something potent behind her cottage. The village-wise woman, or as the local priest might call her, future witch trial candidate, prescribes remedies involving everything from dried nettles to goose fat. Some of them even work, mostly by accident. For a headache, you might get a compress of cold cabbage leaves. For a stomachache, it's a tea made from herbs, and, if you're fancy, a pinch of imported spice. For anything more serious, it's bed rest, and the hope that your household can spare you for a week. Of course, there's always the barber surgeon, part stylist, part enthusiastic amateur surgeon. Need a tooth pulled? The barber can do it, right after your trim. Minor surgery? Just grip the armrest and scream into your sleeve. Anesthesia is provided by strong ale and the distraction of 3 friends holding you down. Bleeding is the solution for nearly everything. Headaches, fevers, melancholy, marital issues. If you survive, the doctor takes the credit. If not, it's clearly the will of God. The most terrifying health hazard, though, is childbirth. For Tudor women, giving birth is a test of luck and endurance. Midwives do their best with clean hands, herbal brews, and a lot of hope. Complications? There's no hospital, no antibiotics, just crossed fingers and a backup prayer circle. If you make it through, congratulations. You'll be up and back to chores before the week is out. If not, well, the family will name a new baby after you, in your honor, and carry on. Contagious disease lurks everywhere. Plague, sweating sickness, mysterious coughs that sweep through the household in the night. The standard cure for any fever is to keep you warm, give you broth, and quarantine you in the least drafty corner of the cottage. Quarantine, in this case, means sharing your sickbed with 1 or 2 siblings and a family cat who refuses to leave. Injuries are part of everyday life. Burned yourself on the hearth? Slap some lard on it and keep moving. Stepped on a nail? Wrap it up and walk it off. No one is quite sure how wounds heal, but everyone is certain that complaining about them does not help. As for mental health, the Tudor solution is simple. Ignore it and get back to work. If you're too sad for too long, someone might recommend a pilgrimage or just more leeches. Through all of this, the local priest is always on hand to offer spiritual guidance, last rites, or at least a stern warning about the dangers of gossiping on Sunday. If you're very sick, you get blessed. If you recover, it's a miracle. If not, well, life expectancy wasn't great anyway. So you do your best to avoid injury, eat enough pottage to keep up your strength, and pray, if not for health, then for a few months without an outbreak of anything ending in pox. Up next, the pressure to procreate, because in the Tudor world, the only thing scarier than a cough is a quiet cradle. You're expected to start producing heirs immediately. If you don't, you get blamed. If you do, you get to do it again, on repeat, until you either succeed or run out of luck. From the very first morning after your wedding, the entire household is watching you, not in a welcome to the family kind of way, but in the way one might observe a particularly unreliable egg timer. Grandparents hover, in-laws drop unsubtle hints, and your mother-in-law develops a sudden obsession with checking the fullness of your cheeks. You can't sneeze without someone exchanging knowing glances. Cough at the breakfast table, clearly morning sickness. Nap after lunch? Congratulations. You're already assumed to be in a delicate condition. The social expectation is relentless. Tudor society, after all, isn't looking for soulmates. It's looking for bloodlines. Your primary job is to produce children, preferably boys, preferably soon, and preferably in a quantity that means at least a few will make it to adulthood. Forget romance. The household tally is measured in cradle rockings and baptism records. Each month that passes without news brings more questions. Each failed attempt, because, let's face it, miscarriage and stillbirth are tragically common, is greeted with hushed whispers and awkward silences at church. It's never the man's fault, naturally. His virility is assumed to be beyond question. If things aren't happening quickly enough, you'll be fed odd herbal teas, made to pray harder, or sleep with a lucky onion under your pillow. The pressure is physical and emotional. You start to measure time not in months or seasons, but in missed periods, worried sighs, and the number of times someone casually asks how you're feeling. Your husband tries to help in the only way he knows how, by looking proud and confused at the same time. Everyone has advice. Eat more beans. Avoid cold feet. Recite a specific psalm while spinning wool. Your own wishes? Utterly irrelevant. And then, finally, if the fates align and you do fall pregnant, the celebrations begin with a side of panic. Pregnancy is its own Tudor lottery, and every woman knows the odds. There's no prenatal care, no ultrasounds, just a stream of advice and a midwife who's seen it all and isn't impressed by much. You're expected to keep working until the last possible moment, chopping wood, kneading bread, scolding chickens, because idleness is bad for the baby, or so they say. The entire village monitors your progress. Your cravings are a source of endless gossip, and you might find gifts on your doorstep. A lucky charm, a turnip carved with a blessing, or a well-meaning prayer card, just in case the saints are taking requests. Birth itself is a gamble. There's no such thing as a routine delivery. Every childbirth is an event, equal parts hope, terror, and a test of endurance. If you make it through, you're praised for your strength and immediately asked when you'll have the next. If you don't, the village will mourn and then start asking what your sister is up to these days. For those who survive, the recovery period is short and practical. A few days of rest, then it's back to chores, now with a newborn attached at the hip. And the cycle repeats, childbirth after childbirth, in the hope that one day you'll look around and see a crowd of healthy children, living proof that you've succeeded in the one area that matters most. If you can't, the blame is yours, the sympathy is limited, and the pressure never lets up. In Tudor England, you're not just building a family, you're building the future, one sleepless night and one hopeful prayer at a time. Next, the not-so-private life, because in this world, your neighbors know your business before you do, and your reputation depends on things you can't control. Every move you make is watched, reported, and discussed by the neighbors. Your reputation hangs on things you can't control, like the weather and whether your husband comes home sober. Living in a Tudor village means you don't just have family, you have an audience. The walls may be made of wattle and daub, but secrets don't stand a chance. If you sneeze during prayers, someone notes it. If you trip on your way to market, by sundown it's become a story involving 3 chickens and a dramatic rescue. Every action, misstep, and facial twitch is catalogued by an invisible army of social spies, most of whom have nothing better to do than monitor your life, like a particularly dramatic soap opera. Your home is your castle, but the drawbridge is always down. Neighbors drop by for small talk and to take mental inventory of your linens, your meal portions, and your level of visible exhaustion. The village well isn't just a place to fetch water, it's the local news desk. Here, every cough, complaint, and new recipe becomes breaking news. Someone is always ready with advice you didn't ask for. How to keep a husband happy, how to dry herbs, how to ward off the evil eye with last year's turnip. Reputation is currency. Women are judged on everything: how they sweep, how they sing, how quickly they bounce back after childbirth. Did you serve stew 3 nights in a row? Clearly you're struggling. Is your laundry suspiciously clean? You must be showing off. And heaven help you if your husband is seen at the alehouse more than twice a week. Even the most stone-faced wives can't stop the flow of rumors. She must have said something to upset him. Perhaps she's too proud. Maybe she has ideas above her station. By morning, what began as a casual observation becomes a cautionary tale for the entire village. Your children, of course, are their own source of drama. If they're loud, you're indulgent. If they're quiet, you're neglectful. If one of them is caught throwing mud, you'll hear about it from 3 different people, plus your mother-in-law, who is still keeping score from your own childhood mishaps. Even the weather gets in on the act. A failed harvest can be blamed on your bad luck or questionable character. Did the bread fail to rise? Maybe it's a sign. Did your goat wander off? Clearly, you didn't pray hard enough last week. Privacy is a luxury no one can afford. Letters, if you can write them, are read by anyone who finds them. Confessions whispered to a friend have a way of echoing through the parish by the next market day. There are always ears pressed to doors, eyes peeking from behind curtains, and children running errands who double as informants for the older women who never leave their window seats. If you attempt to keep something quiet, it only fuels more speculation. And yet, this lack of privacy is its own strange comfort. In sickness or sorrow, the same neighbors who gossiped about your burnt bread will show up with broth, advice, and at least 3 competing theories about how to cure what ails you. Support and surveillance come hand in hand. The community that watches your every move is also the one that brings help in the hardest moments. Still, the judgment stings. One rumor, one misunderstood glance, can haunt you for years. Reputation sticks harder than porridge, and sometimes there's nothing you can do to change it. So you smile, keep your head down, and learn to live with an audience. After all, tomorrow, someone else will provide the drama. Next, child, widowhood, death, divorce, and what it means to be back on the market in a world where your choices are even slimmer than the village stew. If your husband dies or disappears, you're suddenly a hot commodity again, this time with even less say in your future. Mourning period optional. Let's set the scene. You've barely figured out how to run a household, your hands are still raw from scrubbing, and you're just starting to recognize the difference between husbandly silence and husbandly snoring. Then, suddenly, you wake up one morning and realize you're a widow. Maybe it's a fever, maybe a farming accident, maybe he just wandered off during market day and never returned. Sometimes, in Tudor England, a man can vanish into the mists and reappear as the punchline to a particularly morbid joke. As soon as word gets out, the village grapevine springs into action. Your neighbors arrive in a flurry of condolences and casseroles, each one eager to see how you're handling your new freedom. Freedom, of course, is a relative term. You're free to grieve, as long as you do it with just the right amount of public weeping. Too much and you're hysterical, too little and you're suspicious. For a brief window, you hold the spotlight as the tragic heroine, but don't get too comfortable. In no time, the whispers begin. Who will she marry next? Does she still have that dowry? Is she even old enough to bake her own bread? Mourning customs are mostly a test of endurance. Depending on your family's means, you might don a black shawl for a few weeks, or simply tie a dark ribbon in your hair. Either way, you're expected to look sad, work hard, and avoid smiling at any eligible bachelors until at least the second market day after the funeral. If your late husband's family is feeling generous, they might let you stay in the house a while. If not, you're packing up your things and heading home, another pawn in the marriage market. Divorce, on the other hand, is less common and much messier. In theory, the church might grant an annulment if your husband turned out to be a secret bigamist, a heretic, or, most scandalous of all, not interested in you at all. But in reality, most divorces are just quiet separations, followed by years of awkward encounters at church and the local bake sale. But here's the twist. Once you're single again, you're valuable in a new way. As a widow, you've proven you can manage a home, survive a husband, and possibly even inherit a goat or two. Prospective suitors circle like market crows, some hoping to snag your leftover dowry, others just looking for a wife who already knows which end of a chicken is up. Your family is back to drawing up contracts. Only now the terms are stricter and the negotiations brisker. You may even find yourself matched with a widower, a man whose children are almost as suspicious of you as you are of his turnip stew. Through it all, you have less control than ever. The first time around, at least there was the illusion of choosing a future. This time, your fate is decided in back rooms and whispered conversations, usually while you're sent out to fetch more firewood. If you're lucky, you'll end up with a gentle soul, or at least someone who's already lost interest in giving orders. If you're not, well, you'll learn to be resourceful and keep your own secret stash of emergency bread. Child widowhood is both an ending and a beginning, the closing of one impossible chapter and the start of another. The rules haven't changed. You're still bartered, still judged, still waiting for a moment that's yours alone. But if you can survive widowhood, you can survive anything, even another round of matchmaking. Next up, scandal and survival. What happens if you break the rules, dodge an arranged marriage, or dare to hope for something like real love, run away, cause a scene, refuse to marry? Prepare for a lifetime of being the cautionary tale at every village gathering. Tudor society is a web spun tight, and the easiest way to get tangled is to try and break free. The rules aren't just written, they're etched in stone, recited over dinner, and embroidered into every pillowcase you own. So what happens if you decide those rules aren't for you? Spoiler: nothing good, unless your life goal is to become a legend for all the wrong reasons. Let's say you refuse a marriage proposal. Your parents look at you as if you've announced you'd like to marry a goose instead. Refusing a match isn't simply uncooperative. It's seen as selfish, ungrateful, and, worst of all, bad for business. Your father might spend a week muttering about family honor and the price of barley. Your mother's reaction is more direct. Disappointed sighs, pointed looks, and possibly a session of guilt, inducing weeping in the kitchen, just loud enough for you to overhear. The penned news doesn't stay in your cottage. It races through the village faster than a chicken on market day. Suddenly, everyone has an opinion. Old women at the well will shake their heads and whisper, "Remember what happened to Margaret? Refused a good match, and now she's living alone with 3 cats and a suspicious mole on her cheek." You become the star of cautionary tales told to younger girls. Don't be like her, or you'll end up embroidering handkerchiefs for eternity. Maybe you decide on a more dramatic path, running away. The word alone is enough to spark a village-wide panic. Running away in Tudor England is not for the faint of heart, or for anyone hoping for anonymity. You'll be tracked by gossip, pursued by fathers, brothers, and even the neighbor's dog, who is highly motivated by the promise of leftover stew. If you make it as far as the next village, you might be welcomed, right up until someone recognizes your shoes. Then it's straight back home, where your punishment is decided by a committee of stern relatives and the local priest, who specializes in sermons about wayward daughters. If you're truly brave or reckless, you might try causing a scene, public arguments, raised voices, or even gasp crying in church. You might as well hang a sign on your neck that reads "Future Spinster." Public scandal is entertainment in a world without TV, and you'll be providing reruns for years. Even your descendants will hear about that one-time great-aunt Beatrice stomped out of the feast and threw a turnip at her suitor. Sometimes, rebellion isn't loud at all. Maybe you just drag your feet, fake a cold, or become an expert in disappearing right before someone needs extra hands in the kitchen. Even subtle forms of resistance have consequences. There are chores to assign, and the rebellious daughter always gets the least appealing jobs. Think scrubbing the privy or mucking the barn after a particularly enthusiastic sheep. Yet, amid the cautionary tales and gossip, there's a thread of admiration, usually whispered only among other girls. Maybe, just maybe, you stood up for yourself, even when you knew the price. Maybe you hoped for a different life, a new path, a story that didn't end with "and then she got married." You may not have found freedom, but you left a mark. Your refusal, your rebellion, becomes a secret legend for girls who sit spinning wool and dreaming of something more. In the end, surviving scandal in Tudor England is an exercise in patience, endurance, and stubborn hope. The world won't change for you, but sometimes the stories you spark, however cautionary, are the ones that echo loudest. Next up, secret loves, forbidden flings, and why Tudor romantic comedies usually end with a wedding or a public apology. Even child brides dream of romance. But if you're caught with the wrong person, you risk everything from shame to the stocks. The love story usually ends with a stern talking to and extra chores. Romance, for the average Tudor child bride, isn't about candlelit declarations or poetic letters hidden in flour sacks. It's about stolen glances across the market, blushing when a farmhand smiles, and inventing plausible excuses for why you were loitering by the hedge at dusk. The stakes are higher than your mother's expectations, and the chances of a happy ending are somewhere between miraculous and don't count on it. You see, even in a world governed by contracts and cattle, the heart wants what it wants. But the heart, unfortunately, isn't in charge. The local priest, your father, and a half-dozen nosy neighbors are. Courtship is strictly regulated. There are rules for how long you can speak, how close you can sit, and how many times you're allowed to smile before someone decides it's time to fetch a chaperone. Letters are risky. Even the act of writing one could start a scandal if it falls into the wrong hands. Usually your little brother, who is forever on the lookout for leverage. Most secret Tudor romances start with the smallest gestures, helping a boy gather kindling, lingering by the well, or sharing a fresh-baked roll under the pretense of feeding the chickens. Even making eye contact in church can be enough to set tongues wagging. If you're especially daring, you might meet at a fair or festival, brief moments of freedom where laughter is slightly louder and the chaperones are slightly more distracted by the mead. But make no mistake, if you're caught, there are consequences. At best, you get a stern talking to from your parents and a schedule packed with extra chores. Maybe if you're busy enough, you'll forget how to flirt. At worst, the village turns your budding romance into a cautionary tale, and you find yourself enduring public shaming, sometimes literally, as stocks and pillories were not just for petty thieves, but also for wayward hearts. For girls, the fallout is always worse. Your reputation could take years to pleasurably recover. If it ever does, suddenly your name is paired with whispered rumors about that night near the mill, and you're used as a living example of why daughters should be seen, not heard, and certainly not kissing anyone behind the bakehouse. Even boys don't escape unscathed. The wrong match could mean losing out on a better marriage prospect, a scolding from their own parents, or the infamous talk from the local priest about virtue, sin, and the dangers of unsupervised hand-holding. Tudor love stories rarely have happy endings. The best you can hope for is a match that wasn't entirely arranged against your will, or a husband who looks kindly on you, even if he never writes poetry. The rest of the time, it's heartbreak, awkward encounters at the market, and a deep, unspoken understanding that your secret crush is now off limits until he's been properly betrothed to the butcher's daughter. Yet for all its tragedy, the pursuit of romance never really dies. You and your friends trade stories of girls who ran off to London for love, or of that one couple who managed to grow old together, possibly because they were both too stubborn to remarry. These legends are handed down like family recipes, spiced with hope and a dash of caution. So you dream quietly, heart safely hidden under layers of wool and social expectation, and you spin your own little stories while spinning flax by the fire. You learn to keep your secrets well, because in Tudor England, the only true rom-com ending is the one nobody else ever finds out about. Next, faith and fear, how the church weaves itself through your marriage, and what happens when your personal life becomes public penance. The church watches over every aspect of your life, especially marriage. If you break the rules, it's not just your soul at risk, it's your dowry, your children, and your standing in the village. In Tudor England, religion isn't just something you do on Sundays, it's the operating system running quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, in the background of your entire existence. From cradle to grave, and definitely at the altar, the church has its finger on your pulse, its nose in your business, and its hand in your purse. Before you can even dream of marriage, there are rules, lots of them. Bans must be read out loud in church for 3 weeks straight, just in case anyone wants to object or remember a previous engagement you may or may not have forgotten to mention. Forget to announce your intention properly? The wedding is off, and your parents are left explaining themselves to a priest, with a memory like a steel trap and a taste for scandal. Secret weddings are strictly forbidden, unless you're a noble, in which case, well, who's counting? And any hint of an elopement will have you in the bishop's office, explaining why the saints should forgive you. Once married, the church remains a constant presence. Every milestone, from the birth of a child to the odd Tuesday argument, is shadowed by religious expectation. The priest is both spiritual guide and social referee, stepping in to mediate disputes, bless new homes, and occasionally scold you for missing morning prayers, even if you were up all night with a teething toddler. Marital spats aren't private, confession booths double as village rumour mills, and penance can mean anything from extra prayers to public apologies, or, in truly scandalous cases, a swift trip to the stocks. Break the church's rules, and consequences are swift and public. Adultery is a sin that threatens not just your immortal soul, but also your children's legitimacy. If suspicion falls on you, your dowry can be withheld. Your children might be labelled illegitimate, and your husband might be encouraged to find a replacement with a cleaner slate. Gossip is bad, excommunication is worse. The church controls who can be godparent to your children, who can be buried in consecrated ground, and even which holidays you must fast or feast on. The calendar is a dizzying rotation of saints' days, feast days, and prescribed penances. Miss one, and you'll be noticed. For widows and widowers, the church steps in as matchmaker, grief counselor, and, when necessary, enforcer. Remarriage requires official permission, and any attempt to bypass the rules is met with a wall of paperwork and prayers. If you're hoping to divorce, good luck. Annulments are rare, expensive, and usually reserved for people with friends in high places, or at least friends who know how to forge a convincing family tree. Even joy is regulated. Laugh too loudly at a wedding feast, and the priest will remind you that all happiness must be tempered with humility. Weddings aren't about love matches. They're about creating stable Christian households, producing baptized babies, and upholding the moral fiber of the village, or so you're told, usually by someone who's just spilled mead on their surface. And yet, for all the oversight, the church does provide a kind of glue, a shared rhythm, a calendar of hope, and the promise that if you toe the line, you and your family will be looked after in both this world and the next. The threat of hellfire is always there, but so too are the comforts of ritual, the warmth of community, and the occasional thrill of getting away with a minor infraction. So you bow your head, say your prayers, and try to remember which saint is in charge of happy marriages. In the end, faith and fear keep you walking the line. A line as carefully watched as your reputation, your household, and your ability to keep from falling asleep during Mass. Next, old before your time, how being a Tudor child bride means you're seasoned by 16 and already looking for your own daughter's betrothal prospects. By the time you're 16, you're considered a seasoned wife, mother, and household manager. You're also probably missing at least one tooth. 16 candles? Forget it. In Tudor England, there's barely enough wax for one, and you use that up patching the draft in your window last winter. Childhood ends at the same time as your first set of chores, and the adult responsibilities just keep stacking. By the time you'd be celebrating your sweet 16 in the modern world, you've already mastered the fine art of haggling at market, the delicate dance of appeasing a mother-in-law, and the uncanny ability to sleep through a midnight thunderstorm, 3 crying children, and the local cockerel auditioning for loudest animal in the county. Your body, meanwhile, keeps the receipts. Wrinkles are earned early from squinting at stitches by rushlight. Your knees creak from endless hours crouching in gardens and by the hearth. You've already given birth to 1 or 2 future household labourers, lost a couple of teeth to stale bread syndrome, and your back reminds you every morning that feather mattresses are just a cruel myth. You don't just feel older than your years, you look it. The skin on your hands is rough from lye soap and scrubbing. You have calluses in places you didn't know existed, Sunburn is a seasonal rite, and if you're not careful, you'll find your eyebrows singed off from one too many close encounters with a sputtering fire. You're so good at ignoring minor aches and pains that you might not notice when something actually is wrong until it's pointed out, in front of the entire family, by your ever-watchful mother-in-law. Responsibilities come in waves. You're in charge of keeping the entire household running, which means you know where every stray needle and patch of clean cloth is hiding. You can spot a ripening turnip at 20 paces and diagnose a sick chicken at a glance. Your recipe repertoire is limited, but you can turn leftovers into Sunday stew with the confidence of a Tudor Gordon Ramsay. And let's not forget the emotional labor. You mediate disputes between children, negotiate with neighbors over borrowed tools, and manage your husband's moods with the patience of a saint and the subtlety of a diplomat. If you ever get a moment to yourself, it's usually because you've locked yourself in the root cellar checking for spoilage and having a good cry. Or, if you're lucky, a laugh with a friend about how the local priest once caught his cassock on the church door and had to finish the sermon in his undershirt. Socially, you're no longer the new bride. You're the one giving advice to the next generation. Sometimes with actual wisdom, but mostly with warnings like, don't leave your bread near the dog. And trust me, say yes to the turnip now. It's all you'll get later. Young girls look up to you, either with awe or terror, and the neighbors all know your name, and at least 3 embarrassing stories about your early attempts at bread making. At this stage, you might even start preparing your own daughter for her future, passing along your good apron, your sternest look, and all the family recipes. It's a relay race, and you're already handing off the baton, knowing she'll be expected to run just as fast. If you're lucky enough to make it to 20 or beyond, congratulations. You're now old by Tudor standards. A survivor, a leader, a legend in your own living room. Sure, your best years may have been before you hit puberty, but your legacy is secure. Hard work, stubbornness, and the ability to smile through a missing tooth. Next up, what survives when childhood doesn't? A look at the tiny joys and small victories that make all this madness somehow worth it. When your childhood is traded for marriage, what do you remember? Sometimes it's the laughter with siblings, the taste of honey on a rare good day, or the secret wish that your own daughters might have it just a little bit easier. Because while history loves to catalogue the marriages, the chores, and the lists of who wed whom for how many cows, it rarely pauses for the soft, secret treasures that linger long after childhood is rushed out the door. Life as a Tudor child bride is fast and relentless. But even in a world ruled by contracts, chores, and chicken-related catastrophes, small joys manage to slip through the cracks like wild violets between the stones. You might not remember every chore or every scolding, but you'll remember the moments when your sisters conspired to sneak an extra bit of cheese from the pantry, or the thrill of racing barefoot through muddy lanes before anyone could stop you. You remember giggling fits by candlelight, whispered stories under lumpy blankets, and that one time your brother tried to fix the roof and ended up wearing half of it. You remember the odd afternoons when work was rained out and everyone crowded inside to play at dice, tell tales, or simply sit and listen to the wind banging the shutters. There's the taste of sweet apples in autumn, handed out by a smiling aunt before the cellar was emptied by winter's hunger. Or the smell of bread, real bread, on feast days, when for a few glorious minutes you forgot how hard life could be. Maybe you remember the sound of church bells in the morning, or the hush of snow falling on the thatch, transforming your cramped world into something briefly magical. There are the songs sung at twilight, when the day's work is done and the fields glow gold in the fading light. The thrill of a secret crush, even if it never made it past blushing at the market. And always, somewhere in the back of your mind, The hope, fierce and quiet, that your children, especially your daughters, might be spared some of the hardships you endured. As you grow older, these memories grow brighter, not dimmer. The bruises fade, but the stories last. You find yourself telling your own children, and the occasional wandering neighbor, the tales that made you laugh, the tricks for surviving another bad harvest, and the lessons you learned from a life lived at double speed. Maybe you teach your daughter to patch a dress while secretly teaching her to speak her mind. Maybe you slip your son the last piece of honeycomb and wink, because tomorrow's sweetness is never guaranteed. Looking back, you know the world is not gentle, and the past even less so. But you also know that laughter, love, and the stubborn refusal to let the hard days win, that's what endures. When childhood is swapped for marriage, and play is replaced by ploughing, it's the secret joys that matter most. They're the ballast that keeps you steady when everything else tilts wildly. And so, as you tuck in your own little ones, you pause to remember the laughter, the honey, the firelit stories, and the silent vow that their lives, somehow, some way, will be just a little brighter, a little softer, a little freer than yours. Next up, the Tudor bedroom makeover, because after a day, or a lifetime like this, everyone deserves at least a halfway decent place to rest their head. Welcome to your new room, which is less palatial suite and more stone box with a suspicious draft. Your bed is stuffed with straw. Your blanket is someone's old cloak. And the wall art is whatever fungus is growing in the corner. Interior design tip. Try not to inhale too deeply. Forget what you've seen in period dramas. There's no velvet canopy, no elegantly draped silks, and definitely no four-poster bed that isn't being shared with at least 3 generations of fleas. The Tudor bedroom is a masterclass in medieval minimalism, forced by necessity rather than aesthetics. The first thing you notice is the chill. It's not just cold. It's the kind of deep, persistent damp that feels like it's seeping into your bones, gnawing away at your last crumb of hope for a cozy night's sleep. Your mattress is a sack of straw, lumpy and flat in all the wrong places, with a mysterious squeak every time you so much as breathe. Every few months, someone brings in fresh straw, which briefly makes you feel like royalty, right up until you realize half of it has already been claimed by an army of insects. You pull your blanket up to your chin and try to ignore the prickly sensation, only to find that warmth is relative and comfort is an urban legend. There's no privacy in your new boudoir. If you're lucky, there's a curtain, or more accurately, a ragged piece of linen strung between you and the rest of the room. If you're not, congratulations, you're now part of the family's open-concept sleeping plan, which includes midnight snoring from every direction and the occasional visit from a confused chicken. Walls are cold, stone, or wattle, and good at 2 things: letting in the wind and growing mold in increasingly artistic shapes. The one small window, if it exists, is covered in greasy cloth or horn, letting in a sliver of grey daylight and a full spectrum of drafts. Storage options are best described as imaginative. Your dowry chest, theoretically, a symbol of your new household status, doubles as a bench, a table, and the preferred hiding place for the house cat. Any other furnishings are borrowed, inherited, or improvised. A 3-legged stool, a creaky trunk, maybe a single shelf with a comb, a holy medal, and, if you're highborn, a comb with slightly fewer teeth missing. Decor is practical. Family tapestries, if you're lucky, hang to cover the worst cracks and stains. If not, your wall art is whatever is currently growing, crawling, or hibernating there. Occasionally, someone will attempt to brighten the space with a posy of dried flowers or a religious icon, But these gestures are mostly symbolic. No amount of lavender will cover the smell of damp wool, old cheese, and the lingering hint of last night's turnips. Nighttime sounds are a cacophony. There's the wind howling through gaps in the door, the clatter of mice conducting their nightly relay, and the unceasing chorus of snores and mumbled dreams. Privacy is an aspiration, not a reality. If you need to get up in the night, good luck. The floor is as cold as river stones and littered with obstacles. From stray boots to a chamber pot you absolutely must not tip over. But there's a strange comfort to be found here too. The straw might be itchy, but it beats sleeping on the floor. The draft keeps you awake, but also means you're less likely to suffocate in your sleep. The old cloak, for all its holes, has a story or two sewn into its seams. And as you lie in your stone box with a suspicious draft, you realize this is home now. Not glamorous, not comfortable, but yours. Next, the in-law Olympics. Because after you've survived your first night in this suite, you still have to impress everyone else who calls home. It's not just your husband and his mother you have to impress. There are sisters, aunts, uncles, and at least one distant cousin who keeps offering unsolicited advice about producing heirs. Every meal is a competitive sport. Every compliment is laced with warning, and losing is not an option. Welcome to the In-Law Olympics, an event that lasts all year and requires more stamina than a ploughing contest in spring. You quickly discover that every family member is a judge, and the scoring system is based on rules no one bothers to explain. The moment you wake up in your suspiciously drafty bedroom, you're already competing. Did you rise early enough? Was your first task completed with sufficient cheer? Did you offer a polite greeting to everyone, including the relative who never blinks and always smells faintly of pickled herring? The day's first event is breakfast. Here, you'll be judged on everything from the thickness of your porridge to the way you hold your spoon. Your mother-in-law surveys the scene like a coach with a clipboard, while your new sisters help by commenting on your technique. Oh, we always stir widdershins for luck. The uncles watch from the sidelines, occasionally weighing in with tips like "don't burn the toast again," or, more cryptically, "watch the cat." You're never sure if these are metaphors or genuine kitchen advice. After breakfast, it's on to household chores, where the competition intensifies. Laundry is a relay race, except your teammate keeps swapping your clean linens for dirtier ones. Mending is a test of both speed and quality. Miss a stitch, and someone will remind you about it well into next year. When you fetch water, you're compared to every bride who came before you. Marjorie could carry 2 buckets at a time, and she never spilled a drop, someone mutters, as you slosh your way back to the house. Meal preparation is another high-stakes event. You chop, stir, and season under the close scrutiny of 3 generations of in-laws, each with their own secret recipe for stew, none of which you're allowed to change. If your bread rises, you get a cautious nod. If it sags, the entire meal is served with a side of gentle disappointment and pointed stories about that one time Eleanor baked a loaf so perfect the village priest declared it a miracle. Of course, there's the social portion of the competition, surviving conversations without accidentally insulting someone's family, faith, or favorite pig. Compliments are delivered with the precision of a duelist's sword. Your stitching is coming along nicely for a first attempt. Such a clever girl, I suppose your mother taught you that? Even laughter comes with strings attached, as every joke is dissected for hidden meaning, and every smile must be genuine, but not too genuine. Then there's cousin Ethelred, the wild card. He's only related by marriage but never misses a meal or an opportunity to share opinions about childbearing, pig-rearing, and proper posture. Ignore him, and he sulks. Engage with him, and you're trapped in a half-hour monologue about the importance of a firm handshake and a firm pudding. And just when you think you've made progress, another challenge appears. The festival, the market day, the visit from a distant uncle, whose name everyone forgets, but whose standards are impossibly high. Here, your performance is public, watched not only by your family but by the entire village, ready to add your successes or stumbles to the ever-expanding book of family lore. Winning the in-law Olympics isn't about earning a gold medal. It's about surviving with your dignity intact, collecting a handful of sincere smiles, and maybe, just maybe, getting a whispered "well done" as you clear the table. Lose, and you'll be hearing about your defeat every winter for the next decade. Next up, the apprentice wife, learning the ever-changing rulebook, one mistake and correction at a time. You thought you were prepared for marriage. Turns out there's a whole rulebook no one gave you: when to speak, when to sew, when to be invisible, and when to apologize for things you didn't do. Welcome to the crash course in Tudor etiquette, where every mistake is a family legend by sundown. You step into your new life determined to impress. After all, you've practiced your curtsy, you can bake bread that only occasionally resembles a paving stone, and you can sew a hem straight enough to pass inspection. If your mother squints just right, how hard can it be? The answer, you discover before your first cup of morning ale, is harder than outwitting a suspicious chicken, and twice as likely to end with feathers everywhere. Rule number 1. The rules are always changing. That helpful suggestion about serving porridge with a smile? It was yesterday's law. But today, smiles are suspicious, clearly hiding something. When you ask if you should help with the milking, you're told, "No, dear, that's not your place." The next day, you're scolded for not knowing the cows' names. You quickly learn the art of reading between the lines, watching your elders for clues about the correct way to hand over a spoon, light a candle, or arrange the rushes on the floor. Communication is an Olympic event. Simple questions become complex negotiations. "Would you like some bread?" might actually mean, "Please stop hogging the butter." A compliment about your stitching is often followed by a "but" and a list of improvements that would fill a manuscript. The safest response to most things is a polite nod, and a note to self to ask your most sympathetic sister-in-law for clarification later. Then there's the question of when to speak. Silence is golden, but only if you use it wisely. Stay too quiet during family dinners, and your in-laws worry you're hiding something, or worse, sulking. Speak up with too much enthusiasm, and you risk being called bold. Either way, your words are weighed, measured, and discussed long after the meal is over. Your husband, meanwhile, mostly grunts in agreement with whichever female relative has the sharpest elbows. Every mistake is public. There's no learning in private. If you misplace the prize, sugar, everyone knows. If you burn the stew, it's the talk of the market. Someone is always there to recount your blunders, usually with dramatic flourishes and the subtle suggestion that things were much better in their day. If you dare to contradict an elder, or, heaven forbid, offer a new idea, you'll quickly learn that innovation is a dirty word. Etiquette extends to the most unexpected places. How to share a bench, how to wait your turn at the well, how to offer a compliment that is neither too effusive nor too dull. Even apologizing is an art. Sometimes you apologize for things you didn't do, just to keep the peace. "I'm sorry the rain ruined the laundry" might be met with a knowing look, as if you personally conjured the clouds out of spite. But in time, you get the hang of it. You find allies among the other women, those who survived their own crash course, and now offer gentle guidance, winks, and emergency scones. You learn the shortcuts, which chores win the most. Approval, how to deflect tricky questions, and which relative is most likely to defend you in an argument. Some days, you even earn genuine praise, usually couched between two gentle criticisms, and slowly, your confidence grows. You patch the roof without being asked. You remember the right way to fold a napkin. You learn when to fade into the background and when to stand your ground. The mistakes still happen, but now they're stories you'll laugh about, eventually. Next up, secret languages. How to communicate with sighs, glances, and coded embroidery. Because in a Tudor household, what you can't say is sometimes the most important message of all. Tudor households are fueled by secrets and whispered alliances. You quickly learn to communicate with raised eyebrows, coded embroidery, and the subtle art of saying everything with a sigh. Friendships are forged over clandestine gossip and the mutual agreement that the men in your life are, in fact, clueless. Forget learning Latin or French. The real language you need is a blend of glances, gestures, and phrases with double meanings. The day might begin with chores, but beneath the surface, a constant stream of information flows just out of earshot of the menfolk. It starts with a look exchanged over the wash basin, a carefully timed cough, or the delicate shuffle of feet on packed earth as you cross the room. The message is always clear. Meet me later by the well, and bring news. Girl talk in Tudor England is a survival strategy. Every day, you and the other women in the household navigate a labyrinth of rules, expectations, and ever-shifting alliances. No one says what they mean outright. Instead, you invent 100 ways to hint, nudge, and nudge harder. Did you see the weather today? Might actually mean, did you see who left the barn with the miller's son? A compliment about someone's pastry skills could be a veiled dig at the previous night's disaster. It's all about tone, timing, and knowing which unspoken rules matter most. Embroidery, supposedly a simple pastime, becomes a secret codebook. A red rose stitched into the corner of a napkin might signal support. A pattern of daisies is a thank you for a confidence kept. Even your choice of thread can speak volumes. Blue for loyalty, green for envy, black for my patience is gone, and so is the good cheese. If a tapestry suddenly features a fox near the henhouse, you know someone's up to mischief. Your mother-in-law might never notice, but your sisters-in-law do. The hearth is headquarters for whispered updates and intelligence briefings. There, as you knead bread or peel vegetables, snippets of news are traded. Who's courting whom? Who burned the soup? Who was seen lingering too long by the priest's house? The men, meanwhile, debate weather and crops, blissfully unaware of the real intrigue swirling right behind them. Then there's the art of the sigh. A well-placed exhale can mean anything from I'm exhausted to there's a scandal brewing. Depending on context and volume, a raised eyebrow is worth 1,000 words, and the secret language of side eyes could fill a library. Sometimes, the only way to vent frustration is through dramatic floor sweeping. Nothing says you are being ridiculous like slamming a broom into a corner while humming a hymn just a bit too loudly. Every relationship is a delicate balance of trust. True friendship is precious, forged in fire, or at least in shared laundry disasters. These are the women who help you sneak an extra honey biscuit, who warn you when the gossip wheel is turning your way, and who will distract the men while you sneak outside for a breath of fresh air. With them, you share dreams, worries, and the occasional plot to hide from chores. Together, you learn the power of solidarity, knowing that a united front can withstand even the sharpest tongue or the sternest matron. Of course, you have to be careful. Sometimes, secrets leak out, alliances shift, and the wrong word in the wrong ear can land you in hot water, literally, if it's laundry day. But more often, the hidden network of female communication keeps you afloat, connecting you to every woman who's ever had to smile through a scolding or hide a giggle behind her apron. In a world where men make the rules, women make the plans, and the plans are always evolving. So you keep your wits sharp, your stitches straight, and your stories just between friends. Next up, dowry disasters, when the money, sheep, or silver promised never arrives, and your family finds out the hard way just how much a broken promise can cost. So tonight, as you sink a little deeper into your impossibly soft mattress,